Hey everyone, my name is Megan, and welcome to the Nutrition Podcast series brought to you by your friendly neighborhood health peers. For those who aren't familiar with us yet, the health peers do a wide range of outreaches on a number of topics related to nutrition, yes, but also for fitness, mental health, sexual health, and more. Now, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We're very excited about our new podcast series, and we're calling it Let's Taco About Nutrition. In this podcast series, we are covering topics like healthy eating, stress eating during finals, navigating holiday foods, which was our last podcast, and today's podcast, which is tips to avoid the horrors of processed sugars. For this podcast, we want to respectfully acknowledge that we are recording from the unceded traditional Coast Salish lands, which includes the Tsleil-Waututh, Kwikwetlem, Qiqéyt, Stolo, Stz'uminus, Katzie, Tsawwassen, and SÁNEČ nations. I also wanted to share a little bit of information about one of the nations we're acknowledging, the Tsleil-Waututh nations. Their name means people of the inlet, and at one time, their lifestyle was dictated in this area by the seasons, where they would flow from area to area with the sun and the snow, using the natural resources here to sustain themselves. Today, they are more than 500 people strong and growing. So I'd like to introduce my fellow health peer co-hosts today. So I have with me Adrianna, Aleisha, and Jessica. And without further ado, let's taco about processed sugars. So the question that we're wanting to answer today is, what is processed sugar and why is it bad for you? So sugar kind of gets a bad rap, but not all sources of sugar are created equal. Sugar exists in lots of things that we eat, as you probably guessed, because we're talking about it right now. But sometimes it's in there by the grace of Mother Nature, and other times it's added in by humans. Often the stuff that's added in by humans is what we want to try and eat less of or avoid altogether. It's usually there to increase the pleasure that you get from eating it, which increases the likelihood that you'll eat more of it. And the more that you eat, the more money you spend on these foods and the more the food manufacturing companies make and all of that fun stuff. But one of the big differences in natural versus added sugar is that natural sugars are usually found in places like fruit, which also have the added benefit of having fiber to help slow down the absorption of that sugar. Plus, the fruit has bonus nutrients. Go fruit. Foods with added sugar don't typically have those added nutrients or fiber. Processed foods are, well, processed. This means that they have to go through some sort of mechanism by which they are changed from their natural state. And this process usually removes any good for you stuff that might have been in there to begin with. Other stuff is then added to it or back to it sometimes. And sugar is usually one of those things. So sugar is hard to avoid, especially considering that our bodies need it to function. But with some of the tips from my fellow health peer co-hosts, we can help you make sense of it all. So I want to hand it to the group now and start off by giving you guys a little test. So can you give me an example of a food that has added sugar in it? And bonus points if it's something that's unexpected.
So something I think that might be a little bit unexpected are things like sauces. So tomato sauce or even ketchup, they often have a lot of added sugar as well that you may not be aware of that you're consuming. Jessica, what about you? What do you think?
I think that fruit juices are an example of something that has a lot of added sugar. Even though it is naturally sweet from the fruit, there's often a lot of added sugar to make it taste better. Aleisha, what do you think?
For me, I found bread to be the most surprising because bread's not something you eat because it's sweet, and it's often something we put other stuff on top of to make it taste better. It's not something that we usually eat plain. So I find once you try different breads and you consciously taste it, you can really taste the differences in the sugar contents and the sweetness of it. Which brings me to the next topic, which is spotting and avoiding processed sugars. So processed sugars, like Megan mentioned, are very commonly associated with heavily processed foods, such as soda and ice cream. These heavily processed foods also tend to be high in salt and added fat and low in all the good stuff. One fun fact that I learned was that lollipops and pixie sticks have no real nutritional value, and they're almost 100% pure sugar, which is terrible for you and your teeth. A good rule of thumb for Halloween candy is just stay away from candies that may stick in your teeth, or try to moderate your intake and brush your teeth thoroughly after. Your dentist will thank you. So besides processed foods, processed sugars are found in foods that may not be considered sweet, such as bread, fruit juice, sauces, crackers, yogurt, pasta, the list goes on. And sugar is often put into these foods to help with taste, preserve the food, or make it more appealing. So some tips you can use to spot and avoid processed sugars are: number 1, check the nutrition label. The Heart and Stroke Foundation recommends you consume no more than 10% of your total calories per day from added sugars. So that's about 48 grams or 12 teaspoons of added sugar. So make sure you compare brands for the percentage of sugars. One thing to keep in mind of is white bread often has more added sugar than brown bread, but it's good to check the nutrition label because it may just be white bread dyed brown. Brands are a little tricky like that. So tip number 2 is look at the ingredients and look for words ending with OS, O-S-E, such as glucose, fructose, dextrose, lactose, maltose, etc. And look for syrups like corn syrup and juices. One thing to help you is that the higher up the ingredient list means the more of it there is. For example, lollipops, the first ingredient on the ingredient list is sugar, which tells you just how much of lollipops is made of sugar. So what's everyone's tips for spotting and avoiding processed sugars? Megan, how about you?
Yeah, I really like that tip of looking at the nutrition label. That's usually what I do, and it's where my eyes go first on the packaging. And so what I like to do is look at the nutrition label, take a look at the sugar and the serving size. And like you said, like if it's over a certain percentage by weight of the serving size, then I'll check the ingredients list as well, just to see if it's one of those OSE words and if it's like an added sugar. And that usually helps me make my decision of whether or not I want to buy it. Jessica, what do you usually do?
I think that's a really good idea, Megan. Similarly, I like to look at the nutrition label and make sure the percentage of sugar is reasonable. So on the bottom of the nutrition facts label, it now provides a percent daily value guide that suggests 5% or less is little and 15% or more is a lot. So depending on the food item, I like to aim for foods with a sugar percentage that is below 10% and not more than 15%. Adrianna, what's your method?
I think those are all great little tips to keep in mind, but something I do is something that Aleisha actually mentioned, is to just compare the brands of something that I'm going to be potentially buying. So let's say, for example, it's 2 cartons of juice. I like to compare the 2 different nutrition labels and then see which one has the less amount of sugar and the less amount of added sugars. I think that can be something helpful to do. But speaking of the amount of sugar in juices and beverages, that leads us perfectly into our next topic. So all of these beverages can have a really high amount of sugar. And I think in order to fully understand just how much sugar can be in all of these beverages, it's easier to represent it visually. So to do this, I like to think of grams of sugar in terms of how many sugar cubes I would be consuming for each beverage. So per 1 sugar cube, there are 4 grams of sugar. And that means if a beverage has 20 grams of sugar, you would be consuming 5 sugar cubes just for that one drink. And I think that's just a bit crazy to think of, because I don't know that anyone would just eat 5 sugar cubes in one sitting, but we have no problem just drinking all of that sugar. So next time you go to check the nutrition facts table of a drink or even a food item, you can get the amount of sugar by seeing how many sugar cubes you would be consuming. So I thought now would be a good time to do a quick guess the sugar quiz for some popular beverages. So I'll give you guys the product and I want you to tell me how many sugar cubes you think are in each drink. So let's see. How about we start with Megan? So we've got a 12-ounce, just a regular can of Coke. So how many sugar cubes do you think would be in that one can of Coke?
In one full can of Coke.
Yeah.
How many sugar cubes? Okay.
Sugar cubes.
So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to do the math in my head. I'll say like 7 sugar cubes.
Okay, good guess. Good guess. It's actually a bit higher. So for that one can of Coke we were just talking about, it's got 9 3/4 of a sugar cube.
Wow.
So that's how much sugar you're getting in your one can of Coke. Okay, we'll move on to another one. Aleisha, how much sugar do you think is in 1 cup of chocolate milk?
I like to use Coke as a measuring guide, so I'm going to say less than Coke. I'm going to say 4 sugar cubes.
Really close. It's actually 6 sugar cubes, and that's just for 1 cup of chocolate milk, which I think is really high. All right, next, Jessica. So 'tis the season. We've got a pumpkin spice latte. So this is a grande size, and it's also got whipped cream. So how many sugar cubes do you think are in that 1 pumpkin spice latte?
That's hard. I know they're really sweet, but my guess is maybe 10.
Close. It's actually 12 and a half sugar cubes, which I think is wildly high for 1 pumpkin spice latte. So keep that in mind the next time you go to order a drink or order different beverage. They can often contain a whole lot of sugar. So it's a good idea to get something half sweet or maybe no sweetener added in at all.
Okay, now I'll be giving some tips on alternatives to sugar, as well as some healthy snack ideas when you are craving sweets. Something to keep in mind is to be cautious about what sort of sugars you are consuming. So trying to avoid processed sugars for the most part. Now we know more about processed sugar from the other health peers, it is also important to note the difference between processed sugar and natural sugars. It is essential we still consume foods that contain natural sugars in our diets because it provides us energy and it is a necessary part of our diet for good health. So rather than cutting sugar out of your diet completely, which is very unrealistic, it is good to find healthier ways to satisfy those sweet cravings we get by making smart choices. So try going for foods that are nutrient-dense versus foods with empty calories. Nutrient-dense foods are foods that are high in nutrients but are relatively low in calories, while the term empty calories apply to foods and beverages composed primarily or solely of sugar, fats, or oils. These supply little to no nutrition in the way of vitamins, minerals, proteins, fiber, or essential fatty acids do. Another tip with controlling your sugar cravings is to be aware of your hunger and satiety levels. It is helpful to have fuller meals throughout the day so you won't feel the need to snack as often or end up with a large sugar crash at the end of the day. Foods that are high in fiber and protein provide sustained satiety versus foods that are high in fat and sugar. So for instance, oatmeal, whole grain pasta or rice, and potatoes are foods high in fiber and will keep you full for longer periods of time, compared to chips and cookies, which are high in fat. So now I'll be covering some healthier alternatives when you are craving a sweet. A simple and easy go-to snack is to reach for whole fruits such as apples, kiwis, grapefruits, or bananas. Whole fruits are good choices since it keeps you full longer and contains much less sugar compared to blended fruit that are found in fruit juices, which also contains a lot of added sugar. And another easy snack you can make is a DIY trail mix. So this is great since you're able to customize exactly what you want in your mix. So in your mix, you can add things such as dried fruits, cranberries, raisins, nuts, and even sprinkle in some chocolate chips. So speaking of chocolate, if you are like me and you are a huge chocolate lover, try going for dark chocolate rather than white or milk chocolate. Dark chocolate generally contains less sugar and is a rich source of antioxidants and minerals. And you could also incorporate a bit of chocolate in healthy foods as well. So for instance, if you melt a bit of dark chocolate and drizzle it onto some fresh fruits, that's a really easy and healthy snack. By doing so, you're able to reduce your processed sugar intake while also satisfying those sweet cravings. So just a final tip and to keep in mind is that it is okay to treat yourself to some sweets once in a while. Just remember to be mindful about consuming these foods in moderation. Especially during the Halloween time, it is important to eat your favorite chocolate or candy bars in moderation. So now I'd like to know from the other health peers, what are some of your favorite sweet alternatives? Let's start off with Adrianna.
All right. I do like to do a couple things. If I'm craving like a sweet drink or something, instead of ordering it from like Starbucks or a different place, I like to make my own homemade tea lattes or coffees whenever I can. And that way I can be conscious and control the amount of sugar I'm adding in and the amount of milk too. So if I want something a bit sweeter, I could add in a drop of honey. And then sometimes when I crave like a sweeter dessert or something, I like to go for a yogurt with some fruit, but I like to buy the plain kind mind, again, so I can add in how much sweetener I want in whatever I'm eating. It's okay to have that sweet treat once in a while, but just to be mindful of what you're eating and then maybe try to make the healthiest choice possible. How about you, Aleisha? What do you like to do?
Yes, I totally agree. I love making chai, which is Indian spiced tea, at home whenever it's cold outside. And I like to put my own sugar because I know my mom makes it a little too sweet for me. But one thing I like to do is bake. I love to bake, and I find often when you go to the supermarket or Subway to get chocolate chip cookies, they tend to be a little sweet. And when you bake, you can moderate how much sugar you put into the cookies. And it also allows you to experiment and have fun with the recipe, like trying honey or maybe applesauce, or even put some dark chocolate chips in there. What about you, Megan?
Yeah, sometimes I'll just kind of indulge a little bit. I usually keep a chocolate bar in my cabinet at all times, just in case I'm getting a craving for something sweet. But if I'm wanting to have something that's a little bit on the more nutritious side, I will cut up an apple, and I'll usually do one of two things. If I want that added sweetness, then I'll microwave some honey for just a couple of seconds, just to kind of make it a little bit more runny, and then I'll drizzle it over the apples. Or if I'm not wanting to add any extra sugar, then I'll take some cinnamon and I'll just sprinkle it over top of the apple slices, and it makes it really, really delicious.
Those are all great ideas, everyone. They all sound delicious. Yeah, great suggestions. So that brings us to a conclusion for today's podcast about the horrors of processed sugars. We hope you found this episode helpful and now know a little bit more about processed sugars, why you should avoid it, unexpected added sugar in foods and beverages, tips on managing your sugar intake, and healthier alternatives. We encourage you to apply some of our tips during your next grocery run or when finding a snack to eat. We love to hear your thoughts and opinions about processed sugars. Please leave a comment down below sharing some of your favorite healthy alternatives for sweet cravings and how you plan to manage your sugar intake during the upcoming Halloween season. Be sure to tune in our next podcast to talk more about nutrition topics. Bye, everyone.